Welcome to Producer's Toolbox. I'm really happy you're joining us today. I'm your host, Carol Adrian, and today we are going to talk about how much creatives love their lawyers. So we have kind of a two-part presentation today in that filmmakers, musicians, artists, creatives of all kinds get tremendous support from getting the legalities correct. So not only are we going to talk about the kinds of legal issues that creatives face, but Nina Josephson from Philadelphia VIP is going to tell us how to get a wonderful attorney even when we think we can't afford one. So welcome to my guests, Tina Josephson, the small business coordinator from Philadelphia VIP, and Tris Fall, who specializes in intellectual property law from Fox Rothschild, and who has helped me personally in the past. So let's talk a little bit about how we can get to an attorney, even if you're an independent, a nonprofit, a low-income artist, and then Tris is going to talk about all the aspects which really behoove us to have an attorney for. So, but Nina, this is a wonderful organization which has helped me going over contracts, creating contracts. But let's talk a little bit to Nina about how we can meet up with you guys and take advantage of this fantastic organization.
Awesome. Thank you for the introduction, Carol. So I am the small business coordinator at Philly VIP. I manage our community economic development initiative, which is kind of just a party of one, just me, at the Philly VIP office. And what we're doing is connecting low to moderate income small business owners and nonprofits that don't have like a ton of attorneys on their board or financial resources available to hire legal counsel. We work with nonprofits in Philadelphia and small businesses in Philadelphia. We also work with lots of artists who don't have like a brick and mortar location, but so long as that you live within the Philadelphia County, we are more than happy to work with you. So Philly VIP likes to call itself the hub of pro bono in Philadelphia. We do a lot of work with individuals on things like tangled title and home ownership. So you may have heard of Philadelphia VIP through the other work we're doing in the city. Those referrals all come through our community partners. But what makes our community economic development work a little different is that everyone comes directly to me. So we have an application on our website that small business owners and nonprofits can fill out. Even if you're not like incorporated as an LLC, you're just a sole proprietor. You may not think of yourself as a business owner, especially if you're in the creative field. We are still more than happy to help. And we've got a couple of different models for supporting small business owners and nonprofits that I wanted to talk about today. Sort of the most general way of getting legal assistance or just better legal understanding is through our series of webinars. I have been working really hard to get this up and running and expand the number of presentations that we're doing. All of our webinars are live and they're hosted by fantastic volunteer attorneys in our network. There's an opportunity for Q&As at the end. So if you're not sure if you might have a legal question, but you think you might just want to join in for an hour on Zoom, it's a low effort, low commitment way of getting started and getting connected. You can definitely sign up for our mailing list on our website, and that's how you'll know about upcoming events. They're also online, phillyvip.org/events. Then let's say you took a webinar, you have questions specific to your business, but you're still not sure exactly what you might want to do. So you have a feeling maybe you've got some intellectual property that you'd want to protect, but you're not sure what that process will look like. You're not sure if it's worth it right now at this stage of your business. That's where our program, Ask an Attorney, comes into play. So I believe Tris has done this himself, but this is a fantastic opportunity to meet with an attorney one-on-one just to discuss larger legal questions about a specific legal topic. So I'll make sure to connect you to an attorney with relevant expertise in that field, so you're really talking to an expert and you can just get information. This is especially good for business owners who work with other partners who might want to go back to some other parties to discuss further before jumping the gun on some next steps. And it's a great way to just dip your toe into legal services as well, because I know I'm not an attorney myself. some of this legal language can be really stressful and confusing. And sometimes it's just nicer to get some information, sleep on it, and then come back to me when you're ready to get started. And then that brings me to our last model of support, which we call full representation. This is our strongest model of support, and this is to help you actually execute next steps. This is not representation in court, so we're not providing an attorney to litigate, but you can get an attorney to help you draft a contract, review a contract, negotiate a lease, file a trademark application, file a copyright, a patent, things like that. We do a lot of work with corporate governance, so bylaws and articles for nonprofits, tax exempt status for nonprofits, forming an LLC, or changing items to your corporate structure and business partnership. We also do a lot of stuff with real estate and property because we know there are a lot of issues there. And we do some work with zoning and licensing, although our resource pool is less strong in that area. But I would say for sure, contracts, intellectual property, landlord-tenant issues, these are fantastic things to get ahead of with an attorney. Don't sign a commercial lease before having an attorney look over it. And don't sign a contract before having an attorney look over it. And since it's a free resource, I really, really encourage everybody to sort of get ahead of any potential legal issues before they arise, because that's when you can really get the most out of a volunteer attorney through VIP. So I really, really encourage anybody who isn't sure but thinks they might want to start thinking about legal aspects to their business to get in touch with Philly VIP. My inbox is always open. Anyone's welcome to email me if they have questions. Carol has an infographic that she can drop at the end of this. But again, you're welcome to go to phillyvip.org and get connected to fabulous volunteer attorneys like Tris.
I can vouch for the fantastic seminars. I've attended 3 in the past few months. And they're an hour long and they are packed with information. And I thought, sometimes we associate having to connect with an attorney with something bad or impending doom, but there's really a whole other side to that where it's about protecting your work, and so important. And Tris Fall really helped me with a major decision a couple years ago, and I got an offer to write a book about the subject of my documentary series in production, Civil War Medicine. And a very good publisher, Pegasus Books, made me an offer. And then they sent a very complex, mysterious contract, and I wasn't sure what I was signing up for. So Tris went over the contract. Thank you so much. And something that you said helped me make the decision. You explained all my questions about it. And then you said you were surprised that this particular publisher was very generous with their authors. And I thought, okay, that's my publisher. So thank you so much. Let's talk to our fellow creatives about why we need you guys so badly, Tris.
Well, thanks, Carol. Thanks for having me. And let me just put in a quick plug for VIP. I've represented a number of VIP clients over the years. It's a wonderful program. As Nina said, you can get a lot out of it. I highly recommend it. Well, on the legal side, when you're dealing with creatives, there are a ton of IP issues, intellectual property issues. It's really hard to know where to start or what to cover. Do you have anything in particular, or you want me to just throw some topics out?
Well, I heard something recently about, I know it's like musicians have really complex situations. Okay, I'm a filmmaker and you need protections. Plus, with getting anything distributed or online, you really have to have your legalities in order. You've got to have your releases and your copyrights. So I would say anything within that field that hit upon.
How much time do you have? Just kidding. So,
Couple days.
Yeah, really. So music, let's talk about music. Music is particularly complicated. If you're a musician and you write your own music, it's relatively easy because you control your own content. But if you're performing anybody else's music, there are obviously licenses involved, and there are various licensing organizations that get involved. Music has layers, right? First, the music itself has 2 layers. There's the musical composition, the words and lyrics, the lyrics and music that appear on, say, a printed page. somebody owns the copyright in that. It might be the songwriter or the composer or whoever who actually created it. It might not. It might be owned by some publisher or production company or anybody else. It's hard to say, in a vacuum. And beyond that, there's the performed work, the performance. Somebody actually has to play that music. The performance in and of itself is a separate copyright. So then they are often owned by different people. You may have a public domain work. You can take, Beethoven, who's been around, for hundreds of years. The music is in the public domain, and anybody who wants to play it can play it. You can record it yourself. Schools can do it. Nonprofits can do it. Anybody can perform Beethoven. But if you take a recorded Beethoven production, say the Philly Pops does Beethoven, that has a copyright, and you can't reproduce the recorded, even though the music is in the public domain, you can't reproduce their music. And then once the music exists, there are 3 levels of licenses, at least 3 levels. There's the recording license. So you want to take something and record it, and you want to take a Beatles song and do a cover and record it. You need a license for that to reproduce that and sell the CDs or streaming rights. And then there's the performance rights. So you want to take the Beatles song and play it in your local bar. You need a license to do that. And then there's synchronization rights, which are most important for movies, TV programs, anything with any content. It's a synchronization. You're syncing the music to the content. And there's a separate license for that. And the different licenses are controlled by different organizations out in the sort of real world. Sometimes they're owned by the musicians themselves, but more often the rights are controlled by one of the organizations. BMI, ASCAP, there's a whole host of different ones depending on what you're doing. So if you're putting music in anything that you didn't write yourself, be very careful. Make sure you have the right license. And you really need, well, at least we recommend you have a lawyer to do that because, frankly, I don't do music. I know enough to be dangerous, but I have partners who specialize in music licensing, and that's really all they do. And it's a full-time job, believe me.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. You have a question?
This is why if you've made a short film or a TV program, you can't just put a Taylor Swift song in the background.
That's for sure. If you're doing something like on YouTube and you have a dancing baby and you're playing music in the background, it's your kid dancing around, that's probably okay 99% of the time. It's covered by what's called fair use, which is a complicated subject in itself. Although, as anybody who posts on YouTube knows, YouTube has its own takedown mechanism, and you may, even if you have a dancing baby, you may well get a takedown request from whoever owns the rights in it. That's a whole another kettle of fish we really don't have time to go into here. Another area that's important, especially for filmmakers, in my experience, are releases. If you're going to get anybody involved, if it's just you and your cell phone or a handheld camera, that's great. And you're taking pictures of the birds in the park, you're fine. But if you are involving anybody else, either as an actor or cast or anyone in the crew or anyone who's doing editing or anyone who's touching your film in any way, you want to get a release from them. You don't want a situation where a year or two later, your film is up for an Oscar and somebody comes out of the woodwork and says, hey, I have rights in that. I want to be on the podium with you, or I want to share the money, or whatever it is. You don't want that. So you need a release from everybody involved. They can be pretty simple. They tend to be like a page and a half. And VIP can help with that if you don't have your own lawyer, but they're really essential. The other kind of release is a location release. If you're filming in public, on the street or in a park or in your own home, that's fine. You don't need a release from anybody. But if you're doing something inside of somebody else's property, whether it's your friend, I don't really care who it is, or it's a museum or a business, or if you're doing it even like in the if you're at Temple's campus here in Philadelphia, for example, and you're outside, but you're on the campus, it's not public property, it's private property. You don't want to be doing that unless you have approval, because you don't want to get a cease and desist letter that says, hey, you're using my whatever, and stop. You need to get a release.
It's so important because you don't want to finish everything and put all this work into something and then get a copyright strike online or have it refused at a film festival because you don't have releases for the actors. It's so important. What else are you thinking about in terms of necessities, Tris?
So one issue that's come up several times in my practice recently involves murals. People outside, you're filming on the street and you don't really think about your surroundings. So you just, film and you create something wonderful, and then you get a nasty letter from somebody who says you can't do that. Several times recently, it's because there's a mural in the background. Now, people don't think of murals as art, but murals are art.
Yeah.
And somebody created them, somebody values what they created. And if you're putting it in your film without their permission, that's a bad thing. It's somebody else you need a release from, or more simply, just don't film with a mural in the background. It's just unless you know the artist and you can get something simply. There's plenty of other streets to film on. You don't need a mural in your background.
There's another organization I just want to mention now, the Greater Philadelphia Film Office, which handles location shooting. So if you're thinking, even if you're making a 5-minute piece and you want to shoot at Broad and Sansom streets, you can contact the Greater Philadelphia Film Office at film.org and request a location conversation about where you want to shoot, find out if that is legal. I just found out from them recently that if you're shooting a scene that has a gun in it, you cannot do that in public. You can go onto private, even if you're using a fake gun. So you can go into a home or some other private property and wave the fake gun around, but you cannot do it on the streets. And when the big guns come to town at a Hollywood feature film that's shooting, they now supply a uniformed police officer. They prearrange everything for a scene with a gun and have a uniformed officer there. Have you dealt with the gun situation, Tris?
No, that's really not an IP kind of situation. I don't get involved with that.
Okay.
There are a host of non-IP issues in any production, any film production, whether it's a 5-minute video on a street corner or a major Hollywood film, that don't involve IP, between labor and permitting and all kinds of other things that filmmakers need to give some thought to before they go out and start shooting film.
This does bring to mind just one other option through VIP that I think would be a good idea for anybody who's starting the beginning process of a major project. We offer this in a clinic model. Carol's been to our small business legal clinics, but we can also schedule this virtually or in person outside of a clinic event. This would be an opportunity to meet just for an hour, like the Ask an Attorney program that I mentioned before, but we can get a team of lawyers. So we can get Tris, the IP expert. We can get Mike Sawyer, the corporate expert. We can get a team of minds available. And then you can just tell them, this is what I'm thinking about doing. What do you foresee? What should I be working on in the meantime? And then you come back to me and I can connect you to volunteer attorneys to actually help you execute those steps. So drafting up all those releases, looking into licensing issues, stuff like that. But getting that information ahead of time just seems so critical. And if I'm hearing anything from Tris, it's that these legal issues are really complicated and you do need an expert. And hourly rates can really, 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 really add up. And if you're a grassroots, artist, it's just not feasible. So definitely take advantage of the resources available. I know PVLA also offers volunteer legal support to artists. I'm not sure what their legal requirements or their eligibility requirements are, but If you're not eligible for services through VIP for whatever reason, that's another resource to definitely explore. I know there's also Community Assistance for Friends Enterprise, which is for folks in the greater Philadelphia area outside of the county. So those are other volunteer attorney resources to explore for artists who might not be eligible for VIP.
Those clinics that you guys do are wonderful. You cannot believe that you're actually sitting there with a couple of top flight attorneys, like addressing your specific problem. And I must say, you have excellent snacks.
I know. That's the one bonus of getting corporate hosts is they always do it up with snacks. It's awesome. Yeah, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a great way to meet other small business owners from every nook of the city. Every single time, I'm very impressed with how there is everybody from every walk of life and every business sector you could imagine. So I know we have one coming up in November, which is full, but we have another in January. We're going to have a nonprofit one in April. We are back to clinic scheduling, so that is very exciting.
Well, Tris, how would you recommend that if we haven't been through this process, for somebody who hasn't been through that process, but is a creative, say they're shooting a documentary, how should they position themselves logistically? Like what should we think about in that situation before contacting VIP or you?
Before, well, they have to get their own ducks in a row. They have to have their cast lined up. They have to have their production equipment lined up, whatever, whether it's on a handheld or a professional camera or just, an iPhone, which frankly, iPhone videos are pretty good today. And they need to know what they're doing. So they need a script or an outline or whatever it is. They need to be ready to go. But really, I would recommend before they start filming, they contact VIP or PVLA or somebody else to get the legal framework in place, get releases done if they need contracts with anybody, get all that done. Because after you have created the film and you then turn around and you try to do that later, you may find that some of your people don't want to sign the document you stick in front of them. And then you've got a production that's completed that you can't use because people won't sign. So there's groundwork they can do, and they need to do all the back office work kind of stuff. But before they get going, seriously, they need to get legal involved.
Maybe attending one of the virtual seminars would be a good idea when
Absolutely.
You're really early in your process.
Absolutely.
Because, the ones I've attended really give a tremendous overview of what you are going to be required to answer or deal with or provide. So that you guys are really providing amazing essential services for creatives across the board. Any other thoughts about how we should be thinking?
Oh, so many. So one other topic that has come up recently is the use of other content in your content.
Ooh.
So let's say you have a can of Pepsi, or you have a poster on the wall, or you have a T-shirt that says, "Gone with the Wind" or something, or you have a TV in the background that's running a clip of The Simpsons. What do you do about that?
Yeah.
So we haven't gotten to it yet, but there's a principle under copyright law called fair use, which is frankly very complicated. We probably don't have time to get into today. We could do a whole session on just fair use. But at bottom, de minimis uses are generally fair use. So if you have a T-shirt on the screen for 2 seconds, that's probably okay. If you have a Coke can in the background, that's okay. If you have a poster in the background fleetingly, that's fine. But if you have something longer than that, or on the screen longer than that, or it's an important part of your plot, you need a license to use what you're doing. One example, do you remember the film Shawshank Redemption?
Yeah.
The prison break? And an important element of that film was the Rita Hayworth poster, and later I think it was the Raquel Welch poster on the wall, covering the hole where he was digging his way out.
Yeah.
That was an important element of the film. And there was actually a film clip in the movie at one point with Rita Hayworth I don't remember what the movie was. The uses were fleeting. They were not on the screen for very long. But it was a major production, of course, Hollywood production, and it was a major plot point in the film. They had to get licenses for those uses. There's no way they would have been able to just use them under fair use or any other principle. So they paid, I'm sure, a small fortune for those uses. More recently, there was a documentary, who it was doesn't really matter, but they were doing sort of a backstage kind of behind the scenes film about an opera company. And they were filming the crew behind the scenes doing various things, getting ready or, doing whatever crews do behind the scenes at opera. And in the background was a television, a small television that had an episode of The Simpsons running. And they filmed that. It was 4 seconds of The Simpsons, 4 seconds. So they didn't really realize it at the time. But when they got the finished film there, somebody was like, probably a lawyer, said, you got The Simpsons in here. You really need to approach Fox and get permission. So they did. They contacted Fox, and Fox said, okay, we'll let you use that. That'll be $10,000. For a small budget documentary about opera, $10,000 for 4 seconds. They reshot the scene, okay, because it wasn't worth it. The other problem you have with stuff like this is even if you think it's fair use, even if you have a lawyer tell you it's fair use is a very much facts and circumstances test that different people can disagree about. Supreme Court justices disagree about it all the time, right? And if they can't agree, how the heck can the rest of us figure it out, And you find often that distributors and especially insurance companies don't like uncertainty. They like licenses. So even if you include something that you think or your lawyer thinks is fair use, you might find you will not get a distributor for it. It won't run on Netflix or Amazon or anywhere else because they won't show it because they're not willing to take that risk. And similarly, you may find that you can't get insurance. So the better approach is where you can avoid copyrighted content, avoid posters and films and anything like that. Just keep it out if you can.
You really helped me with something. I frequently lecture, and so one of my it's on historical topics, and one of the lectures are usually 45 to 50 minutes long and involve about 60 still images that I display through PowerPoint. And I went to Tris about it when I started doing that. Now, they fall under educational use, which does make it fair use. But, oh boy, I am so careful now because I think you don't want something, on tap at the Smithsonian that they can't show because you put in some contemporary images. So a lot of times that my graphics come from museums and I do get releases for them because it's a scary situation and that's not on film. I mean, with film, you've got more at risk.
So one quick word about public domain. Public domain is a constantly shifting thing. There's a document online that you can find if you search for it about public copyrights and public domain. It runs like 11 pages. It's not at all easy because there's too many facts that go into every single work to figure out whether it's public domain or not. The general rule of thumb is that if something was published before January 1, 1928, it's fair game. You can do whatever you want with it. Published, but it has to be published. Unpublished works, people's diaries and letters and things are a different rule. And that date is now shifting year by year, slowly creeping up. Next year it'll be 29 and so forth. If it's post 1/1/28, there's a risk that it's still protected by copyright. To figure out whether it is, you got to do some homework. You got to go to the Copyright Office. You got to research it, figure out whether it was published in the U.S. because if it was published overseas, it has different rules. But if it's first published in the U.S., you can research it in the Copyright Office. Now, the problem is that the Copyright Office is only digitized since the new copyright law took effect in 1978. Everything pre-1978 is still available only on paper.
On paper. Wow.
They're working on digitizing it, but it's a process, and they've been working on it for like 30 years. So
Wow.
your guess is as good as mine as to when it will be done.
Well, to all the creatives out there, don't let this stop you. Please, this is more like how to arm and prepare yourself from early on so that when you're finished, that film or album, that you're going to be legally ready to go to have it shown or played or distributed. Thank you so much, Nina Josephson and Tris Fall, for expert advice. And hopefully we are better armed to have legal presentations going out there. And I hope you'll join us again next time on Producer's Toolbox.